Hi, and welcome to the second module of our course for Revit 2024 Level 1, and this is the second module of 9 modules. So now we're going to be looking at navigating the user interface in Revit. First, we'll start off by the home view or the welcome screen, and then we will look at the various components contained within that screen, and we'll move on to the project view and look at the different components that make up the project environment. We'll be talking about the ribbon menus, properties palette, project browser, model areas, view control bar, status bar, selection options, and what contextual ribbons entail. And I'll show you a little bit of how to navigate around the model elements in Revit. Now, we'll be using existing example projects that ships with the Revit installation, and we'll just use them so that we can demonstrate on how to move about the Revit model, how to select elements, and how to access different properties and features within the environment. So we're not creating any model elements at this stage. We're just looking at navigating the environment and having a basic understanding of how the software works. Okay, let's start at the beginning. So from the home view or the welcome screen. So when you start up Revit for the first time, this is what you will see. This is what we refer to as the home view or the welcome screen. So at the top left, we've got the application button and the home button. Now, the application button is very basic. It pretty much just allows you to restore, move, size, minimize, or close the current view. Of course, we don't want to close that now. And if we click on the button next to it, that toggles between the home view and the project view. In older versions of Revit, it would start up with this kind of view and you'd go to File and you'd choose what you want to do. Now you're able to toggle between the home view and the project view. Okay. Next, we've got our models and families area. So from here, we can choose to open an existing model. So if I click there, it's going to allow me to open a new model. All right. From here, I can navigate to where my models are located, and I can then select to open them. If I click on New, it's going to ask me to select a template, and I'll talk about how to set up your template paths correctly in the next module, which is the third one, setting up the model. But for now, just notice that we've got different templates here set up for us. There is an option to browse to additional template file locations, but for now, we'll just leave that until we get to that stage. And then there's the families component here. So that's the second one here was models, and the third one is looking at opening existing families or creating new families by selecting again a family template. So by now you kind of noticed that in Revit, whatever you want to create, you have to do it from a template. A template pretty much contains all the basic building blocks at a minimum that Revit requires to initiate a new project, and then we start building on top of that. The third part here is the recent files. So we can see here that we've got access to either the recent files, or if we click on this, then the home view here will change and it will give us access to the Autodesk Docs environment, which I haven't set up here, but that is an access to BIM 360. And there's something like accessing to my insights. I haven't really set up anything here. This is shipped out of the box, but this kind of tells us, gives us some information and learning and insights on different things regarding the Revit environment. You can also access what's new or online help or the community forums or things like that from the bottom. I've never actually used them, but they are there for your convenience. And then, of course, in the main screen, we can see recent projects that we have created as listed here. There's some sample ones that ships with Revit, and then there's a second category for families. So any recent families that we may have created will be listed here, and some sample ones that ship with Revit. These ones here that say sample obviously are the sample ones that I'm referring to, and the sample projects. So I can only see one here. Usually there's two or three. It only keeps a recent list of about, I think, 10 items, if I remember correctly. So the more projects I create, then the last ones will actually drop out eventually. So if I wanted to open up a sample project, I'm just going to click on that one and let's see what happens. We'll give that a minute. It's a fairly detailed project, the sample project, and it contains multiple discipline models within it. And while that's happening, let's jump back to our training content. Okay, so that covers the basic welcome screen. Excuse me. So next, once our project opens, we're going to be looking at the project view. And again, at the top, we've got that application bar or application button that we saw before, but we also have now the quick access toolbar. The quick access toolbar is going to allow us to access some quick commands like opening, saving, synchronizing with central models, printing and publishing, and of course doing some quick dimensions or annotations or accessing 3D views, etc. We'll get through all of these as we go through the training course. But for now, let's just look at the composition of this home screen. And my computer is a little bit slow because I'm recording the screen while also working on a not so simple model, as you can see here on my screen. Okay, now in here, we have got also the ribbon menu, and that's what you see at the top. So if we access any of these views here, and I'm just going to go into one of the isometric views. So let's just select one of these ones so we can see there's 3D views. And notice I'm in the project browser and I'm actually expanding these views. And then once I get to the view elements, I can double click on it and it's going to open up that view for me. And here we can see an example of what that would look like. So we've opened up a new view and it's also created a tab here at the top in our project model browser. So we can actually see the views that have been open and we can switch between them once they have been opened. So all open views will appear here at the top. If we wanted to look at a plan view, we can open up one of these and there we can see floor plans. And if I double click on that, it's going to open up that view here for me. And now we can see a floor plan. This one has got less information and 3D components to it, so it's a bit faster while I'm recording my screen and a bit easier to navigate. But you can see what is happening when I open these views. So first of all, it adds the tab here at the top and it changes the current view state. Okay, now the ribbon menu here at the top is should be familiar to you within most modern software packages. Working with ribbon menus, so we've got various tabs here at the top. It defaults by opening, when you open a new project, to the architecture tab, and there's various commands here that we can select. There's a tab for structures, there's one for steel connections, there's a tab for precast components, one for systems, which includes HVAC, fabrication components, MEP components, plumbing, electrical, etc. We can insert from external links or import other CAD formats into the current project. We've got an annotate tab here that provides functions for adding dimensions, detail components such as the 2D lines, hatching, text elements, tags, which are pretty much just smart text elements, and then some coloring and filling and symbols in the model. So that's the annotate tab. The Analyze tab we won't be using much in this course, but this allows us to actually send our model for either structural analysis or electrical analysis or energy optimizations and creating reports and things for those HVAC components. Massing and site is used to model conceptual masses, which we don't cover in this level of the course, but it's good to know that they exist. And things like surfaces or topo surfaces are now called topo solids. So this is pretty much generating or creating the existing ground conditions in our models. There's a collaborate tab that allows us to facilitate work sharing and working in collaboration in teams. There's a view tab that we're accessing quite a bit. This allows us to create 3D views, sections, plan views, elevations, detail views, drafting views, schedules of quantities, and so forth. The Manage tab is used to manage the components and set up styles, parameters, line weights, coordinate positions, and a whole bunch of other settings. Add-ins is additional plugins that you can install on top of Revit to extend the functionality. You'll see we've also got a custom ribbon here for our very own tools from BIMWorks. And then there's a modified tab where we can modify components such as copying, moving, scaling, rotating, mirroring, etc. Notice also that when we select a component in the model, the ribbon changes. So these are called contextual ribbons, and they are tools that are specific to the selected element. So if I select an element, the contextual ribbon that provides functionality specific to that element will appear so that I can start modifying or changing parameters for that element that is selected. In this case, I selected railings, so we can see the modify railings ribbon has now appeared, and there's tools that allow me to go and change and edit the railing path. And if I choose to select it, again, it changes the ribbon here slightly, and it's giving me tools or providing me with tools that I can change the railing sketch path. And if I select that line so that I can go and adjust it, let's say to something like that, which might look a bit funny, but just to demonstrate, I can then accept that, and you'll see that it's updating those 3D components or view components directly in the view. My ribbon changes again, and when I deselect, I default back to the previous ribbon state. I'm using my mouse wheel to zoom in and out, so wherever I point my mouse, and if I start scrolling forwards or backwards on the mouse wheel, it will zoom in and out. If I hold the middle mouse button in by clicking it and holding it in and moving the mouse, it allows me to pan the model. That's useful when I want to stay in a specific zoom state, but just move a little bit to the left or the right or up or down. Okay. What else can I tell you? So if we go to another 3D view, let's go down here and let's see if we've got, I'm hoping we've got some isolated 3D view. It doesn't seem like it, but this is a basic view with not too much detail. Now notice that I'm rotating around in a 3D environment. The way I do that is the same as panning in 2D, so holding in the middle wheel mouse button, but I'm also pressing down the shift button on my keyboard. So I've got shift down and I've got the middle mouse wheel button down. And now when I move my mouse around, it allows me to 3D rotate. We've also got this view cube here. If you click on the home button, it's going to take you to the home view. If I click on front, it's going to give me a front elevation. If I click there on that corner, it's going to give me that isometric view. And if I wanted to reset it all again, I just click on the home button. And that's how we rotate in Revit. One thing to notice is that when we rotate, it's going to try to calculate the center of gravity and use that as the pivot point, which means if we have elements that are far outside the model, it might be rotating or orbiting around a strange point or something that might throw objects out of the view. So if I wanted to change the pivot point, all I need to do is select any object in the model. When it's selected, and notice I do that by moving my cursor over the element and left clicking, then when I do the rotate function, that will become the center point or focal point of my rotation in the model. So now that it's selected, my rotate is occurring around the object that has been selected. Okay, so that makes it a little bit handy when you need to focus on something and orbit around something. Make that the center of your Revit universe, so to speak. Okay, so we've looked at the project browser, the model area. Let's look at some of the other components here. So of course, we've got a properties palette here at the top left, and you'll notice when I select something in the model, the properties for that element will appear. All right, if I deselect it, we can see that the 3D view properties are currently displayed here. There's a whole lot of them. Revit is quite a comprehensive and complex system, but don't be intimidated by it. It is also fairly intuitive. And then as we've been changing our views, we've been looking at the project browser here on the left-hand side, and apologies for it being in German. I just open up the sample model from the Revit sample projects. But regardless of that, it's always going to be the same. So we've got the project browser, we've got different views. We can access things here like drawings and sheets. So if I go here to my sheets and I look at this drawing sheet here, it's going to open up this drawing for me. And once it's ready loading, it's going to display that view for me. Look at this beautiful drawing. All right. We've also got a status bar and a view control bar. So let's take a look at that. So if we go back to one of these views, at the bottom left here, you'll see that there's a view control bar. What that means is that we can change the current scale of things. It doesn't make much sense in the 3D environment, but if we look at a 2D view, such as a plan layout, if we wanted to control the size of the text, of the dimensions and the annotations that are present in the model, we don't follow the traditional standard of changing the text height. Now, the text height in Revit is set up already by the element and determined by the current scale. So we can see we're in a scale of 1 to 100 here, but if I change that to 1 in 50, you're going to notice that all the text heights and dimension heights, text heights and dimension components would have updated based on the currently selected scale. So if I put that back to 1 in 100, again, you'll see that's going to all automatically adjust, which means that Revit controls that for us. What we do set up in Revit, however, is the size of the text that we want it to be on paper eventually. So if I look at the properties here for that dimension, I can see that I've got a whole lot of stuff here, but we've got things like the line weight there. Somewhere here will be the size of the text. So here we can see the text size is 2.1 millimeters. And there's a text offset, etc., etc. So these properties will be the ultimate size of the text component once it's placed on a sheet based on the scale that we select here. From this toolbar, at the bottom, we can also select things like the detail level. Do we want to see a coarse representation of 3D components, or should it be medium or fine? We can switch things like the display options. Do we want to see if it's a 3D view? Do we want to see just 3D outlines? Do we want to see textures? Do we just want to see a shaded view? Or, how do we want to represent this model? Just a wireframe, or should it be, consistent edges or realistic materials applied, or whatever the case may be? At the bottom right here, we've got a toolbar where we can select different ways of behavior for when selecting elements. Now, often in the Revit environment, we've got components such as floors and walls and section views and so forth. You want to toggle between whether to select elements by face or not. And if I switch this off, by default, it's switched off, so you won't select elements by face, which means that when I move my cursor in plan view and I want to select the floor, I might not be able to select it unless I select the edge of that floor. All right. But if I switch this on, it means that now when I move my cursor over this floor here, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a light cyan line indicating the boundary of the element when my cursor intersects with it. And now if I select it, I can see I've got the floor selected. This is handy, but it can become annoying sometimes when you've got multiple objects. So depending on what you do, you might want to switch this tool on or off. Okay, and then at the bottom left, we have got the status bar. So this is telling us what to do in the model. So if I want to create a new wall, for example, if I initiate a new command, it's going to tell us what to do. It's going to say, click to enter the wall start point. But there is also another toolbar that appeared here just below the ribbon. And this is giving us some specific options for the object being created. It's telling us that there's a height property, there is a target for the top and the bottom. There's a location line. Do I want to start drawing from the center or the exterior or the inner face of the wall? Do I want it to be chained, in other words, continued? Do I want an offset? Do I want radiuses, etc., etc.? There's also in the ribbon here a draw toolbar. This allows me to select, do I want to define this object by a line, a start and end point, or a rectangle, or a polygon, or circle, or arcs, or do I want to pick existing entities to convert them? So these are all components that we use in the Revit environment. And that pretty much concludes our tour of the Revit environment and the user interface. And I'll see you in the next module. Thank you. Bye.